Hello and a very warm welcome, everybody, to the 2021 Grand Women's Summit. And a huge thank you to Aintree Racecourse and to Women in Racing for pulling this together. This, the sixth Grand Women's Summit. And over the years, held on the Friday of the Grand National meeting at Aintree, it's pulled together some very strong and interesting women in some fantastic discussions. This year, of course, due to COVID, we are coming to you virtually, but hopefully that gives more of you the opportunity to listen in to our conversation today, the theme of which is sport and mental health, a powerful relationship. We've got an amazing panel, but before I introduce them, let me bring you a very special guest and say hello to Evie Patterson. And Evie is here to launch a new initiative in memory of her wonderful and late mum. Evie, tell us more.
Thank you, Alice. I'm honoured to be here today to introduce the 2021 Grand Women's Summit on Ladies' Day at Aintree and the Rose Paterson Community Sportswoman Award. However, and this is not a display of irrational female imposter syndrome, but a statement of fact, it shouldn't be me here today at all. It should be my mother, Rose Paterson, who was chairman of Aintree until she tragically took her own life in June last year. She always did these introductions to the Women's Summit so beautifully and so gracefully, and I cannot hope to fill her shoes. But what I can do is say a few words about her legacy to introduce the award, of which the Women's Summit itself was a huge part. I know how close the summit was to her heart and how proud she was of its growing success year after year. I think it's easy to forget how innovative and novel an initiative it was when it was first set up. And to this day, it remains a relatively unique event in the racing calendar, bringing together people from various different sporting disciplines and backgrounds to discuss the issues facing women in sport, while also enabling the attendees to network, normally over a delicious breakfast in pre-COVID times, and kicking off Ladies' Day in style, in a fun but thought-provoking way. As the first female chairman of a national hunt racecourse, she herself understood what it was like to operate in a man's world and was passionate about helping other women succeed in racing and sport more broadly. She would have been so thrilled to see Rachel Blackmore become the first ever female leading jockey at the Cheltenham Festival this year. What an amazing achievement. And I myself know how much she believed in the value of amateur sport. Thanks to her selflessness, encouragement, and support, I had a relatively successful eventing career as a teenager and was selected to represent Great Britain a few times. Yes, two of our panellists and Alice, your own husband, are some of my childhood heroes. My eventing career was not only great fun, but also an invaluable experience. And it would not have been possible without her unwavering support and willingness to sacrifice her weekends to driving me around the countryside and even sleeping in a horse box. Represented doing this as she recognised the link between physical and mental health so well and firmly believed that competing was great training for life, not least in learning how to cope with failure. I'm sure everyone here today can think of someone in their own life who's done the same for them, quietly sacrificing time, effort, and money, whatever the weather, to help them achieve their goals. Judy Murray, one of our panellists, is a wonderful example of this. And in the circumstances, the theme of today's panel discussion, sport and mental health, couldn't be more fitting, and I'm sure one that she would have thoroughly approved of. The other aspect of my mother's legacy I would like to touch on is Aintree's ties with the Merseyside community. She understood that Aintree and the Grand National belonged to Liverpool and did a huge amount to forge and strengthen links between the racecourse and the communities of Merseyside through sponsorships, partnerships, and charitable causes. She even took in 4 rather naughty equine inhabitants of Park Palace ponies, a riding school for deprived children in Topstith, at the beginning of the first lockdown, and they spent the entire summer with us at home in Shropshire. Because of everything she did, she was and still is incredibly highly regarded and well loved in the community here in Liverpool. So it's an amazing thing to be able to announce now that to bring all these different elements of her legacy together, we are launching the Rose Paterson Community Sportswoman Award. This will be an annual award given by Aintree to recognise a girl or woman from Merseyside who is making a difference to grassroots community sport through participation or support. We want to reward girls and women, sports people or otherwise, who display the qualities that my mother possessed in abundance: perseverance, selflessness, devotion, and inclusiveness, amongst others. Aintree will be reaching out to the community after this year's national meeting to ask for nominations, and a judging panel, including myself, will then pick the winner in time to announce it at next year's Grand Women's Summit. The winner will then receive financial support through a bursary from Aintree throughout the year after, and of course be invited to the Grand National. I'm incredibly honoured to be involved, and I very much look forward to seeing what amazing nominees are put forward next year. Before I finish, my family would also never forgive me if I didn't take this opportunity to mention one final part of my mother's legacy, which we are working on and we are very proud of: the Rose Paterson Trust. This is a charity we're launching tomorrow here at Aintree in her memory to help support suicide prevention. We're primarily a fundraising charity which will distribute funds to suicide prevention projects, and any donations, however small, to help us get off the ground successfully would be most gratefully received. I hope I've made it clear by now what a wonderful woman my mother was and how much she did for others. By launching the trust in her name, we hope to do her proud and use our family tragedy to ourselves help others who are silently suffering like she was before it's too late. We've said from the start that if we can help save just one other family from the agony of suicide, then the initiative will have been worth it. And with that, I will stop there. Welcome everybody to this year's Grand Women's Summit and hand back to Alice, what I'm sure will be a fascinating discussion.
Well, Evie, an amazing legacy you are to your mum, and she would be unbelievably proud, I know, of how brilliantly and heartfelt you've spoken, but also of the fantastic initiatives that you and your family are launching. And we at the Women's Summit feel hugely honoured to be able to launch such a great initiative in your mum's memory, and her memory will never, ever be forgotten, either as part of the Grand Women's Summit or at Aintree Racecourses as a whole. We've got a really exciting conversation that I know she'll be looking down on, and certainly promoting me to ask, hopefully, some not too stupid questions. Well, let's get into the meat and bones of the conversation, because we've got you a fascinating panel. Now, obviously, normally we'd be all together at Aintree in one room and we could have a four-way conversation. We're doing it virtually this year with various different contributors, as you've heard. Jade Jones will be speaking to, as well as Pippa Funnell, the 3 times Olympic medalist. But let's get underway with a chat with Judy Murray, who needs very little introduction as the mother of the former world #1 tennis player Andy Murray, as well as a great athlete and coach in her own right. And Kate Davis, one of the world's leading sports physios and sports psychologists, as she's worked with the Birmingham Royal Ballet, Team GB, England Rugby, as well as Richard Johnson, our very own Richard Johnson, 4 times champion jockey.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Kate, let's get started with you, because one of your roles has been instrumental with the 4 times champion jockey Richard Johnson, who has recently retired, and must be an emotional time hearing that announcement.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the weekend just gone has certainly been an emotional one. It's been a phenomenal career, and feel really honoured and privileged to have been part of that, especially towards the sort of latter stages.
Yeah, an extraordinary career that started when he was 16 years old. And I think that resilience, which showed finishing runner-up no less than 16 times to the great champion Tony McCoy. I think, Judy, that's one of the things, resilience, that you must have instilled in your boys, because before Andy became the great champion he had to deal with the runner-up spot as well quite a few times. Do you feel that sport, in terms of mental health, teaches you how to deal with failure as much as learning how to deal with success.
Yeah, it absolutely does. I mean, we all learn more from our mistakes and our defeats and our disappointments than we do from our successes. So it's really important, whether you're a player or whether you're a coach or whether you're a parent, that you learn how to handle frustration, disappointment, defeat, failure, because you're never going to win every single match that you play, and you're never going to win every race that you run. We only learn by failing. So what is it they say? You've either won or you've learned. I like that.
But with the greatest respect, I should think that took quite a lot of teaching with Andy, because we didn't watching him, it didn't feel like he always coped the best when things weren't quite going his way.
Yeah, he wears his heart on his sleeve, so he shows his frustration and his disappointment with himself, and he's always been like that. I think one of the things he had to learn to do better was to channel his emotions. I mean, because you can get really tired being angry and being frustrated. And, if you're playing in a Grand Slam and you're playing in a best of 5 set match, you can be out there for 4 or 5 hours, and you can't afford to waste energy getting upset over something that you can't do anything about because it's already happened. And I think that when Ivan Lendl came in to coach Andy, and at that time Andy had he had lost 4 Grand Slam finals at that point, and Ivan Lendl had also lost 4 Grand Slam finals before he won his first. So he knew exactly what Andy was going through. But the resilience thing, it's a massive thing, whether it's during a match or whether it's after a match, whether it's injuries, coming back from injuries. I mean, he's been injured. He got injured when he was world number 1. He'd just become world number 1. About 6 months later, he got this hip injury, which has plagued him. And there's a resilience to that as well. The day in, day out rehab, grind, the frustration of not being able to do what you want your body to do, never knowing whether you're going to get back or not. So I think it's one of his enormous strengths is his persistence and his resilience.
I think that's such a good point. And Kate, I know from you that frustration that people find themselves in through injury has almost been career defining for you, hasn't it? That you trained as a physio, but tell us just how that then developed with having people in that safe space with you on the physio table.
Yeah, so I think, as a physio, sort of starting out with more sort of focus on physical components, I think over the years of working with elite athletes, and then very much in the physio room, that's often seen as a place of sort of psychological safety. And so, it's amazing how many athletes or what you hear or what gets said and goes on within a physio room. And sort of over the years, I thought, gosh, I don't really feel too well equipped to deal with sort of some of these things that I'm sort of hearing. And, I guess that's when I started to work in a team of the most amazing sports psychologists. And so over the years, I learned off them, and it really sort of grew this sort of passion of mine really within this sort of psychosocial piece around injury and injury rehab. Because, as Judy absolutely said, you are often working with people as physios at the lowest points of their career. They've potentially been injured, and you are going hand in hand really on that journey to get them back to performance. And so I thought, right, I've got to better equip myself here to do this. That sort of led me on to looking at coping and injury rehab, and looking at teamwork around an athlete. And Judy, again, you would have been part of sort of many of these teams and been in different positions within them. But I think actually within that team, keeping the athlete at the center of it, so they feel in control of that, and surrounding themselves with people with expertise to support them, but that they trust. And I think, how that team then collaborates and works together, for me, is really key to that performance and to that well-being of the athlete as a person.
What's interesting, though, talking to both of you, is that you are extraordinary women in your own right, and you've achieved a huge amount. I mean, Judy, just reading about all the wins that you had yourself, and even your father playing for Stirling Albion in the 50s, sport has been in your life. 64 titles to your own credit. Do you think what you learned from having sport within you at such a young age?
Yeah, it's something that I get asked about a lot, and for sure, I didn't probably realize it at the time, but the role of sport in my life all through my high school years, when I played for school teams in hockey and netball, swimming, and I obviously played tennis and I played badminton as well. I mean, in those days, there were no such thing as indoor courts in Scotland. So you played tennis in the summer and you played something else in the winter. And tennis and badminton were my two sports. But without question, what I learned from playing in all these different teams and being part of community clubs in the village that I lived in, you learn so much about life skills, you know, whether it's leadership and assessing strengths and weaknesses of different people in the team, how to communicate. And, you know, as Katie said, this whole thing of understanding the people that are around you or in front of you and knowing them as people, not just as athletes or players, to be able to find the right way to speak to them. You know what they react to, you know what they respond to. And the better you know them as people, the more chance you have of influencing a change in behavior or an improvement in performance. And I think that, you know, later on in my life, when I started out as a volunteer at our local club when my kids were small. I wasn't a tennis coach. I just went over to volunteer. But, you know, that whole thing of bringing in all the mums to be a mum's army to help me to create more competitions or run a cafe at the club. That was just an obvious thing for me. You create a team and you find out who likes to do this, that, and the next thing, who's got an expertise in something, and you make loads of things happen when you can bring people together. And all of this is exactly the same when you have, as Katie said, the athlete at the centre, and you need all these kind of spokes of the wheel going out where you need people with expertise if you're trying to get to the very top. You know, and I think that when I realized that you yourself as the mum or the person who manages everything, you don't have to be an expert in everything, but you have to know enough and you have to find the experts to put in at the right time. The one thing for me is that you all have to be on the same journey when you get up to the top. If you've got a bad apple in the, you know, in the pack that isn't that interested and is just cruising along, you need people who really want to make it happen and who go out of their way to do the absolute best that they can do, to learn about the competition, to learn about all the new things that are coming on in sports science and medicine. To be world class, you absolutely have to have that mentality of I want to get to the top and I will absorb everything and I want to keep learning. And the minute you have anybody in there who's kind of switched off and I'm happy to be here, is the minute that things can start to derail. So for sure, everything that I learned from my younger sporting days helped me as an adult when I was in business. But then when I went to work in sport, without question, and I'm a huge, huge advocate of the power of sport to prepare you for adulthood. I mean, where else can you get all of those life lessons in anything else than on a sports pitch when you're, you know, part of a team or a training group? It's absolutely invaluable, and I will continue to promote sport.
And I think, you know, you will be very much behind this fantastic new Rose Paterson Award for a sportswoman in the community, because that's exactly what Rose is about in Merseyside. What sport can do for this nation's mental health, whether it's young, middle or old, Kate.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. You know, from grassroots level through to elite, you know, that participation, feeling part of something, that sense of belonging is, extraordinary. You know, for those people maybe looking to get back into sport, whether that be sort of amateur or semi-professional or professional, I think it's also coming back to your purpose and your why. Achieving your purpose, I think, then actually only drives that positive mental health and well-being.
Yeah, and it might be, in my case, Couch to 5K, or it might be in Judy's case, or in your case, at supporting athletes in the countdown to what hopefully is a Tokyo Olympic Games. When you look, Kate, at all the sports you're involved in, whether it's ballerinas or rugby players or national hand jockeys or show jumpers or dressage riders or 3D marathons, all these different sports, do the same themes run through all of them?
Do you know what? I think there are actually lots of similarities, and I think looking at the ones that potentially manage some of those sort of mental stresses that come as part of the job and performing at that level, I think there's one thing that will stand out at me, and I think sort of building on that sort of thing of having the athlete at the center of things, is actually the ones that are curious, the ones that ask questions and want to know why. And you know, for me, it's wonderful when I hear an athlete maybe, you know, ask a challenging question even to myself about a rehab program. You know, I'm like, actually brilliant, because it shows that they really are part of that process. They really are buying into that journey.
It is a powerful relationship, Gigi, sport and mental health, isn't it? And how has sport affected your relationship between all of you, you know, you and your family? Because it's your business, it's your life, you've been the leader in it, but you've then also had to step back and understand when your boys step away from what you can give them. That must have been a tough time.
Yeah, I think, you know, in any individual sport, the onus is very much on the parents to make things happen. If my kids had gone into a team sport, I probably wouldn't have had to do very much. They'd have been signed up by a club. The club would have taken care of the fixtures and the kit and the training and all the rest of it. And I would have been invisible and in the background. But in an individual sport, you absolutely need somebody there to open the doors, make everything happen logistically and so forth, particularly when you're young and you're starting to break through, because as a player, you've got to concentrate on making your game as good as you can possibly get it, whether that's on the court or in the gym, and there's lots of traveling and all the rest of it. But you need somebody around you that you can trust to manage everything for you. And when you start to bring a team in of coach, fitness trainer, physio, somebody needs to make sure they're in the right place at the right time, that they're paid, etc., etc. And you as a young person, it's very difficult for you to manage a team of very much older people. So I have to say I was really pleased when the boys got to an age where I didn't have to do it anymore, because I found I had to learn all sorts of things. I mean, I would never have imagined that I would ever be able to do tax returns in 4 different countries. I mean, I did a PR course, I did a massage course. I did things either because I needed to know in order to be able to help them, or we couldn't afford to pay somebody else to do it. So I had to learn how to do it. But I think that I've been really lucky, because I've been able to share that journey with my kids, and I stepped away when it was the right time to step away. And I quite like being on the sidelines and being able to go when I want to go. And I have a great relationship with my kids. I don't see them as often as I would like to, because of the nature of what they do. So things like Christmases and birthdays and so forth, we don't get an awful lot of what you would call traditional family time, because they're on the road about 10 months of the year. And I would love to change that, but I can't, because they love what they're doing. So, you know, with everything, there's pros and cons to everything. But the main thing is that they're happy, they've been successful,
I think you underplay just how clever you've been in terms of knowing when to step back. But do you think often a man wouldn't necessarily have the initiative to say, I've just got to get that done. I'm just going to get, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that. I think it's a real female thing of just intuition of what needs to get done and just do it.
Yeah, I think it's exactly that. It's right. What do we need to do now? What's coming next? What do I need to put in place? Who do I need to bring in? What do I need to do? It's that multitasking thing. And for me, it's, I sometimes look now and I think, oh, wow, I used to do all that. And now there's about 4 people doing what I did. But, and just when you said that about the, Alice, about saying I just did whatever, it's something that I've been on all these kind of communications workshops, and they say, you shouldn't say I just did whatever. You should say I did. But, I think that's a woman thing again, it's...
Kate, you're a bit like that. I mean, you juggle an extraordinary life of twins and 3 kids and a husband, and then all these different people who call you day and night, who you're managing not only their physical well-being, but their psychological support and their family support as well. How do you support yourself in the middle of all of this? Because you give so much to other people.
Again, it probably comes back to the team. And I think we sort of talk about the athlete team. And I remember working with a fantastic psychologist going into the Rio Olympics. And we were chatting about 3 months before Rio. And we were talking about all the athletes going and their support teams around them. And she said to me, so who's on your team? And I was like, well, what do you mean? You know, me, I'm going off to Rio. And she's like, no, you need a support team. And that was a real light bulb moment to me, because there I was supporting all these athletes and helping them build their teams. And I thought, gosh, who's on mine? So that was a real turning point where, you know, I looked at that and, you know, absolutely my husband, who has to then hold the fort at home. And actually, you know, that psychologist has remained on my team to date. You know, I don't work closely with her, but somebody that's sometimes at the end of a telephone and is a sounding board. So I think actually having my own team to support me to do my job. So yeah, for me, that certainly stood me in good stead, and hopefully will for a few more years.
Psychologically as an athlete, and I'm sure, Judy, you must have seen moving targets when the guys are coming back from injury, but with this Olympic Games having been moved and now seeming so uncertain, Kate, where do you sit with that, and how are you managing the athletes around that?
Yeah, I think it's certainly got its challenges. So I think there's probably sort of two things there. I think, you know, in the longer term, it is just, you know, absolutely being positive, trying to control the controllables. So, you know, where we can predict we might have some speed bumps, let's try and put as much planning in place around that so that we certainly lessen the blow from that. And I think within the short term is just these little mini goals to stay focused. So as a team and as a group, we set ourselves, you know, our own sort of challenges and goals as really part of this sort of bigger process to get to Tokyo. So it ends up almost being little tiny steps, bite-sized chunks. And actually it's then surprising week by week how you build on that. So really it is around the planning, the small goals, and keep talking. You know, I think it's regular communication and again, giving those athletes, especially, like I said, the Japanese are home Olympic Games for them. You know, it's, really big deal. And I think that it's, again, listening to them, understanding them and their concerns and apprehensions around that. And actually what that means to their families and their loved ones.
And Judy, that rings true from what you touched on earlier about this pandemic and lockdown that we're living through, to the things that Kate talks about sport and bringing those mini goals and targets into what we're dealing with at the moment, with things being shut down, with not being able to see our families, with uncertainty and fear all around us. Would you bring those? What would you bring from sport for people in life at the moment?
Don't think about what you can't do. Think about what you can do. And I think it is small goals, because we've got maybe we're getting a little bit closer to a time of when things can open up again properly. But for so long, it's because we've had no end date, it's been very, very difficult to plan everything. So everything has to be just in the short term. What can I do? What can I improve? And I think this whole thing of sense of belonging and community, which has evolved everywhere, not just in sport, but everywhere out of lockdown, is incredibly important. So whether that is Zooms and keeping people connected by Zoom or by FaceTime, whether it's calling somebody up and being able to go out for a walk, I think this kind of the face-to-face connection, even though it's incredibly limited, like for me personally, that's one of the things that's kind of kept me sane. My bike and my friends and going for walks.
So girls, one of the things that we all know is that, I don't know about you, but I've been really disappointed in myself in lockdown, because I have 4 children. I've been trying to homeschool. My husband's an athlete, and I've actually feel that I've let everybody down because I got really angry, and I don't know where that sort of anger came from, but I was disappointed in myself that I didn't cope better and thought I would cope better. Judy, how have you been through this lockdown? How has it affected you on a personal and a financial level, really?
Yeah, you know, I quite enjoyed the first couple of months, because I'm so used to jumping in and out of planes, traveling around the world. I do a lot of work with the Women's Tennis Association on their community engagement around their major events, which I absolutely love. So I'm used to being on the go and living out of a suitcase. So I quite like I've got to stop, grounded, chill out, stay at home. And then, of course, I got bored. And, you know, what I realized was that actually, because most of my work is in front of big numbers of people, it's not going to come back anytime soon. So what I did was I took not all of my content, but a lot of my content, and I turned it into online workshops so that I could continue to engage with coaches all over the world, especially female coaches, because that's a big thing for me, is trying to encourage more women to get involved in delivering tennis. And it's not the same. I love the face-to-face. I love being kind of in amongst it all. But you can't sit at home and just feel sorry for yourself. Well, I kind of did, and I got a little bit addicted to kettle chips and chocolate fingers and Sauvignon Blanc, like many others. But everything in moderation. And the online workshops has been a great way to stay involved.
Okay, I know for you, working from home, homeschooling, suddenly this kind of very controlled and organized professional life becomes very difficult to maintain, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think I certainly learned to sort of wing it very well from an 8-year-old doing maths to sort of jumping on a Zoom call. But I think much like probably Judy, I think that compulsory actually having to stop. I don't think I've ever done that in my career since I left university. And so, very selfishly, actually sort of locked down probably that time with the family and not traveling and sort of rushing around on that front was actually sort of really special time, and probably just time to actually check in with myself and just go back to a bit of the purpose and actually what is all this about, and actually have I got that balance right? Because, they're certainly bringing up a young family, it does certainly have its challenges being away from home a lot. So there's certainly time to reflect on that. And then I think as sort of things got going, multitasking went to another level. I think as people then sort of embrace Zoom, and I think, very much physio, incredible. I think when people were feeling, vulnerable at home, people didn't know if they had aches and pains, how long it might take them to get a doctor's appointment, physio appointments. I found sort of requests coming in from around Europe, really, for people, actually wanting a consultation over Zoom because they were maybe concerned about some shoulder pain or something. So actually work got very busy, and then obviously supporting athletes got very busy. Certainly lots of Zoom calls, and actually amazing how, I can pretty much be squatting and deadlifting in front of a laptop now and sort of demonstrating things.
And just a question for both of you, do you think we'll have an Olympic Games this summer, 2021 Tokyo, Kate?
Do you know, I'm fingers crossed. I think we will now. I think if maybe you'd asked me a month or so ago, I might have thought, 50-50, but it seems really positive now coming from there. So I'm quietly confident.
Judy?
I have no idea. Although having said that, I think in my sport, they've done such a great job of putting on the US Open, the French Open at the end of last year, the Australian Open, which of course are global events, that because they've managed to do that, and because there's still chance to trial a few things. I think if anyone can do it, the Japanese can probably do it.
Well, girls, I could literally talk to you for hours. It's just so interesting. And I mean, we've only touched on the tiny, tiny surface. And hopefully with everything crossed next year, perhaps we can all be face to face at a Grand Women's Summit at Aintree, and we could get you all there to talk even further and introduce you and walk you around the course. But I think for now, thank you so much for just a small insight into your coping mechanisms, your lives, the way you deal. You're inspirational women, and it's been a real privilege to chat to you. So thank you so much. Well, Jade, welcome to the Women's Summit 2021. It's fantastic to have you here as part of Aintree's discussion about sport and mental health, and to have someone with your success is great. Welcome.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Just looking back through your career, I mean, you committed to sport at professionally at a very early age, leaving school at 16 for Taekwondo, but it sort of goes back earlier than that, doesn't it, with your granddad introducing you to Taekwondo? Was that about self-defense?
Yeah, and I think, I started off as kind of a bit of a cheeky, naughty kid. And, my granddad must have been able to see I was starting to go off on the wrong path. And he just wanted to get me into some sort of martial art to, get me on the right road. And I remember my first day, I literally just loved all the flashy kicks, and I was hooked ever since. And like you said, I've done it for most of my life now, which is crazy.
Has it given you a path? You talk about being a little bit cheeky, a little bit wayward, but the discipline that particularly your sport asks for is tough to conform to when you're a teenager and you're a wild, your little wild cat.
Yeah, definitely. I think a lot of people don't realise, how much athletes do have to put into their sport. I think you have to be very hyper focused on, on one thing. And ever since, I was a kid, it's literally been my constant aim, taekwondo and getting to the next step. And it takes a lot on your body, physically and mentally. And I think obviously it makes it a lot easier, the fact that I love it. And it's just amazing to, taekwondo to be my job, and the fact that I love it and I get to do it, for a living is, it's just amazing.
Bounced into all of our psyche when you won the gold at the London Olympics and joined that extraordinary celebration that was the home games. What was it like to be part of that?
Yeah, the London Olympics, I think I'll never experience anything like it again. It was just, a surreal experience. And I remember everyone saying, you're only 19, this is your first Olympics, but I knew that's the one I wanted to win. And the feelings and the emotions and the memories from it, just unbelievable. You just, felt like a sense of pride. And like I said, just standing on top of that podium and everyone willing me on, it literally was the best feeling, that I've ever felt in my life.
When you look at those successes and the highs, winning at just 19 years of old must have presented its own problems, because to achieve a lifetime goal when you're just 19 must then be very hard to maintain the sort of motivation and focus to continue as you have done at such a high level. Was it hard to stay motivated after nailing the biggest goal you could possibly have had?
Like you said, I was only 19, and at the time I wasn't actually the world's best, taekwondo player. I just gave all my heart, all my soul on that one day. Obviously I trained hard, but I wasn't actually the best yet, but I just, performed out my skin and kind of won. And then I remember, the pressure that was mounted on my shoulders, like you said, at literally 19, and everyone was expecting me to win everything. And it was hard, do you know what I mean? And what I've experienced now is like the Olympic dip as well, as, you're going for that one goal. And like I said, you're hyper-focused on doing that Olympics and getting that gold medal. And I think whether you win or whether you lose, there's kind of like an empty feeling after, which is very hard to take. And you kind of think like, what now? Do you know what I mean? I've been going for that for years of my life. It was definitely hard, like, to get myself motivated at first. Going back to the sweaty gym, and I've been doing all these fun media events and the glamorous stuff. But I found my way back and found my motivation again.
For people who obviously have been struggling with motivation through the last year, we've had no goals. I think, what did you take from those difficult times? What were your coping mechanisms? What pulled you back to getting back into discipline, thinking, yeah, actually, even though I've won this, I want to win more? How did you pull yourself around?
What I kind of learned from the lockdown was, I've always knew how important my family and my friends and, just that connection with people, but it kind of heightened it even more. And I think, that's what life is about, is like, loving your family and making memories with your friends and your family. And, that's definitely what I've missed the most. And it kind of gives me the extra motivation, like everyone's had a crap time and everyone needs that little buzz. So I'm hoping that the Olympics can kind of be the light at the end of the tunnel. And like I said, the whole world can kind of come together again, and, Britain will be behind me.
Has it been tough having a moving target? Because obviously you presumably tried to peak for August 2020. Now Tokyo's moved to, fingers crossed, July, August 2021. How's that been for you?
Yeah, to be fair, at first it wasn't too bad, because I thought, right, I've got an extra year. I can, become a better me and kind of not leave a stone unturned and be even better. And it's only now really that, I've started to feel the difference. Like I can feel that, like, it's been a long time, this extra year. And I think because normally we've got little goals along the way, like little competitions, whereas all our sights have been set on just the Olympics for this extra year. And the Olympic cycle's long enough anyway, 4 years. And
so it's the little goals and having the U team. It was interesting. We had Kate Davis, who's one of the Team GB physios, talking to her, and she talked about who's your team, who's around you as the centre of the athlete that makes you feel good and makes you feel motivated. And clearly your family is a very big part of that.
Yeah, I think definitely, like any athlete or anybody really, I think it's so important to have that strong, I call it like a troop, and kind of who's in your troop. And, a lot of people kind of have acquaintances, but they don't have them real people. Whereas, when Taekwondo's over and everything's finished, I'll still have my real friends, my real family, and that will never go. So win or lose, I kind of know, I've got them but beside me, and that gives me that extra boost and extra confidence to go in there.
Because it's interesting, when I was reading about you, and your nickname's the Headhunter, isn't it? You're clearly a bit of a risk taker, although everything seems quite calculated. To go for those headshots, to get the extra points, it's a calculated risk, isn't it? Are you risky in the way would you call yourself a risk taker?
Yeah, I think like my mum always says, I don't know whose kid you are, because she's a bit different to me, but I think that especially for me, the bigger the prize, the kind of more risk you've got to take, and that's what people struggle with, is because when it's a big prize, you kind of want to get in your shell and not kind of take risks, whereas to win something or to do something big, you have to kind of let go and be prepared to lose, but like I said, take them risks. And like you said, at least you give it your all then, and you can walk away and think, I tried my best.
Honestly, I could sit and chat to you for hours. It's just fascinating hearing. And it's so interesting when we talk to Judy or Kate Davis or Pippa Funnell. So many crossovers with you, amazing women. You're so inspirational to us mere mortals who kind of plod along through life. So thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. And hopefully we can get you racing one day and celebrate all your success with us here at Aintree.
Yeah, my family absolutely love racing, so definitely I'd love that.
Well, I'm so pleased to welcome to the 2021 Grand Women's Summit Pippa Funnell. She needs so little introduction. 3 times Olympic medalist, Grand Slam winner, badminton Burley European champion, and not only that, but just a great team member and somebody who's been at the top of her sport for a very long time. Pip, great to have you here.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that. And it's an honour to be asked to be with you.
Pips, just when you look at your career, are there times when you think, how on earth has this happened? And how on earth have I kept going so long?
I think I ask that every day, why I'm still doing it in the first thing in the morning when we get out of bed and feel very stiff, but I'm so extraordinarily lucky that my whole life has been involved with the one thing I'm passionate about, and that's the horses, and everything that's come from my career has really been just the love of working day to day with our 4-legged friends.
Do you feel that having a passion has been your kind of guide in high times and low?
Yes, and amazing good times. I've also had things thrown at me in life that a lot of other people would have, difficult situations, and not just within the sport, sort of outside the sport as well. And I think they're a wonderful, not escape, well, and maybe in some ways they have been escape, and sometimes when I've had to get over tricky or difficult situations in life, I've buried myself in the horses because they've been a sort of distraction. So from my own mental health, I'm enormously grateful to them. Of course, over the years, there have been many times that you think, it's cold, I feel, I might have had a bad fall, and you think, why do I do it? But I think when I've had the thought of having it maybe taken away from me, then you realise, actually, this is what I live for.
I always think of you as hugely positive, and you have such an engaging way of talking about your sport and your horses in particular, and the way you train them and your empathy. But probably you and William not having a family was one of the hardest times in your life. And then this last year, when you've been really not well, certainly for me, looking in on you has been one of the most worrying times. Can you reflect on those a little bit, and how you've managed to navigate your way through?
It's no great secret. We did try a long time ago to have a family, and it didn't happen, and it was a really tough time for us. And again, the sport or the horses really helped me through that and enormously, and possibly I buried my head in the sand, and yes, for the rest of my life I'll always regret not being able to have children, but that's something I've had to learn to live with. And now I'm a lot older, there have been other things that have come, and it's wonderful to be able to help young riders and help youngsters and get involved along those lines. And then last year, yes, I wasn't that poorly last year. It's something that is a concern that, whether I had COVID, I don't know, or there was a period for the first time in my career, I was properly off games and was told by doctors that I had to physically stop riding. And it was the first, yes, I've had to stop riding through breaks in the past, through broken ribs or whatever, but actually last year, and they never quite got to the bottom whether it was long COVID. There were several things that it could have been, but I was very, I wasn't well. And I think, through not being well, I had complete insomnia for 8-9 weeks. And I think that had a huge impact. And for the first time in my life, I was actually really, really frightened because I couldn't sink my head in, or I couldn't ride. And it did frighten me. And as much as it frightened me, once I got better, it made me realise, actually, I'm in one piece. I still absolutely love the day-to-day working with the horses. And so I'm 52 and I absolutely love it as much as ever. And but I had to push myself to get better again. I had to make myself do circuit training, and I do have to do a lot of other stuff now as well as riding to keep in order. And I have a great team of sort of Ash Wallace, the team physio, and I've got another great guy, John Harris, who fixes is the body fixer for the whole of the Billy Stud, and myself and a lot of people. So got a great team helping me.
Kate Davis, who I know you know very well through Team GB, she was talking about who is my team when she's looking at herself and how she can be best placed to help others.
Yeah, I mean, listen, even, you know, to me as an athlete, you know, it's not just about me. And I always love that expression, there's no I in team. You know, there isn't no I in team. So, and that includes me and what, you know, all about running a successful business, a successful operation, whether it's the Billy Stud or my smaller team here at home. It is about teamwork. It's about the physios. It's about the support network behind you. And every person plays a crucial role in that. And that's what I often say with all the guys that work for us. Everyone's role is just important. And I mean, I'm sure even at Aintree, everyone there would understand that, you know, the groundsman that does the work on the ground, from the people that clean the loos, you know, without them, the whole operation doesn't run. You know, it is about teamwork, and it's about that trying to make people, you know, it's that appreciation of people, isn't it? Make them feel that they actually have a sense of purpose. Because to me, what I find affects me more than anything, is when one of your team members is down, you know, and that's what helps you to be successful, to recognize if people are down, get to the bottom why they are, help them pick them up. And I know when I've had times in my life where I've been low, yes, the horses have been an enormous pickup, but also you rely on your close network of team and close friends. And I think one of the things that hit hard, and I think it must hit all over the place at the moment, is because of the lockdown situation. You weren't able to count on, or not just count on your close friends. You had your close friends, but you didn't have those little things that really kept you upbeat. And I think that's what I've learned over the years, how little things that you don't think are important are very important for your mental health.
One of the things that you're passionate about is young people and helping young people develop in an empathetic way in the way they train the horses, because that's something that you're very passionate about. And the Windrush Foundation is something that you've helped people deal with. And a big side of that has been supporting their well-being and their how they help themselves within a training setup as well as their horses, hasn't it? It's something that you really believe strongly in.
I think it helps where I'm involved with the Windrush Equestrian Foundation. I think it's good for the youngsters to actually hear that they're not alone, that it's so common. And that's one thing when I went through, when in my early days when I was younger, suffering from nerves, and I felt that I used to overthink things, and I think that is often the problem. I really do with any mental things, because I know when I'm busy and really at the top of my game, and I never stop, I don't have time to think about things. And I think often with my mind, when it plays tricks on me is when I'm at a 3-day event and I've only got one horse, because suddenly I've got all that time to think. And it's that part of your brain that can override the other. And I think for those youngsters, I think it's good for them to hear, well, actually, that's normal, feeling like that or getting down about it. And you do sometimes have to just nudge them, and I have to nudge myself and put things into perspective, that actually, yes, I had 2 fences down with that horse, or yes, I stopped at the water jump, or I ran out here. But actually, in the big scale of things, you know, I met this amazing lady today who came, she's got terminal cancer, and then you think she's fighting a fight and she's just taking it, she's being so strong. Why am I moaning because I had a run out yesterday? You know, and that's something that it's easy for me now because I'm further down in my career. So you think, well, actually, you get over it. But for those youngsters, it's important just to say to them, you know, learn from that. You know, you had a hiccup. Why did it happen? And then move on. But don't think it's life-changing, because it ain't, you know.
It's interesting because Judy Murray said exactly that, you know, dealing with Andy through his youth, you know, getting him to understand that losing wasn't failure, it was learning. And
Yes.
And not to throw all the toys out of the pram, and just use it as a springboard to work harder, to learn from the mistake that you made, to make yourself better the next time. And she's very clear about that. I think you're saying exactly the same thing.
Absolutely. I mean, you know, there is a very good quote that says about that. You know, making mistakes are valuable lessons, and if you don't make the mistake, I mean, I know there was an incident years ago at the lake at Badminton. I made the mistake coming off the jetty back into the lake, and the horse stopped, but I learned from it, and I had nearly had exactly the same mistake when I went to the Olympics in Sydney. But because it happened at Badminton, I was ready for it. And if it hadn't have happened at Badminton, if I hadn't have had that problem, it would have happened at the Olympics. And that's what's fascinating, you know, that side of it.
Pips, I literally could talk to you all night, all day. I can hear your doggies are going and wanting you, but always... It's always a pleasure, and you know, you've just got so much to give, and we're so thankful to you for taking the time. Thank you so much. I know you're flat out busy, but really appreciate the time. Wow, well, what an extraordinary group of women, and what a huge privilege to be able to chat to them and hear their views and their lives, their life stories and their coping mechanisms. And I hope you've got some takeaways from all of those conversations. It's been a real privilege, and fingers crossed next year we can all be in one room all together, and the fireworks, I think, would fly with all of you there. That's it from us for now, but a big good luck to Suleika Varma, who is the new clerk of the course here at Aintree and will be the first female in charge on Grand National Day. So very best of luck to her and all the team, and of course all the horses and jockeys ahead of the greatest race in the world. It's the 2021 Grand National tomorrow. Join us live on ITV for full coverage of the wonderful day that's ahead. Thank you so much for tuning in.